Robin Sparstow was a lifelong, passionate advocate for whales. During the 1970s, 80s, and 90s, he produced a series of documentary films about the plight of whales and the global movement to save them.
In this windy old weather, stormy old weather, when the wind blows, we'll all go together. Oh, up jumped the humpback, a-singing his song, a-jumping and laughing and splashing along. And then come a sperm whale, and guess what he did? He called to the top with a 50-foot squid in this windy old weather, stormy old weather. When the wind blows, we'll all go together.
The sperm whale is the largest toothed animal on Earth. Male sperm whales grow up to 18 meters or 60 feet in length, and they can weigh over 50 tons. Sperm whales are air-breathing mammals, inhabiting deep waters in all oceans. Different in appearance from other species of whales, the sperm whale has a massive barrel of a head, nearly 1/3 the length of its body, with a long, narrow lower jaw containing a double row of teeth the size of cucumbers, used to catch and hold deep-sea squid upon which it feeds. Like all other cetaceans, the sperm whale has a flat, triangular tail, which gives it tremendous powers of locomotion. The muscles which move it up and down when swimming are among the strongest on Earth. Female sperm whales are much smaller than males, only growing to about 40 feet in length. The legendary Moby Dick of Herman Melville's classic novel, here portrayed in a painting by Richard Ellis, was a rare white sperm whale. The sperm whale can hold its breath and remain underwater for more than an hour. It is capable of diving more than a mile down into the ocean depths, searching for squid and cuttlefish. It uses a kind of sonar or echolocation to find in the pitch blackness of the deep the giant squid which appear to be its favorite prey. This is the unforgettable image of Moby Dick reaching out of the sea to the heavens above in Rockwell Kent's magnificent illustration for Melville's novel. The sperm whale has the largest brain of any creature that has ever lived on Earth. This is a glass model of the brain of a bottlenose dolphin, and this is a model of a sperm whale's brain. The dolphin's brain is comparable in size to the human brain and weighs about 4 or 5 pounds. The sperm whale brain weighs up to 20 pounds, 4 or 5 times the weight of our human brain. And scientists have found that the sperm whale's brain is at least as complex and convoluted as the human brain. Inside the tremendous head of the sperm whale is a giant muscular tank, almost the size of an oil truck. Found inside this great internal case is a unique kind of oil known as spermaceti. Spermaceti oil was greatly favored in the 18th and 19th centuries for use in lamps and candles because it burned without smoke. It was this special quality which made sperm whales the most prized prey of Yankee whalers. For over 150 years, great whaling ships from ports like Mystic and New London, Nantucket and New Bedford sailed around the world in pursuit of sperm whale oil. These ships of sail pitted men in small wooden dories using handheld harpoons against the mighty Leviathan. Whaling in those days was a dangerous and often desperate occupation, involving voyages often lasting 2 or 3 years or more. But the oil brought back from successful trips made millionaires of the ship owners. and contributed significantly to the economic growth of states like Connecticut. In fact, in the 1840s, Connecticut was second only to Massachusetts as a whale hunting state, and New London was second only to New Bedford as a whaling port. In the 20th century, however, commercial whaling became an entirely different kind of operation. Even the blue whale, the largest animal ever to have lived on our planet, became victim of the big steam-powered ships with explosive grenade harpoons fired from small cannons mounted on the decks of catcher boats. All species of great whales were slaughtered mercilessly by the hundreds of thousands, bringing right, gray, blue, fin, and humpback whales to the very brink of extinction. The sperm whale, too, remained a prime target, and in the year 1974 alone, by international agreement, 23,000 of the world's largest brained creatures were brutally killed by modern whale hunters. Dismayed by this remorseless slaughter, a small group of Connecticut citizens in 1974 organized the Connecticut Cetacean Society to see what we could possibly do to help stem the tide and save the whale. When famed underwater explorer Jacques Cousteau visited the Mystic Seaport to dedicate a new edition of Moby Dick, we talked with him about raising public awareness. State Senator Larry DeNardis suggested naming the sperm whale as Connecticut's official state animal.
This became our rallying point. At that time, the state legislature was considering a bill to make the Virginia white-tailed deer the state animal. Our Cetacean Society launched an intensive lobbying drive at the state capitol to have the whale substituted for the deer in this bill. We gained the support of many school children wanting to give the whale a chance. But when the vote was finally taken in the House of Representatives, the contest ended in an absolute tie between the whale and the deer, 67 to 67. So no state animal was named in 1974. But this gave us the opportunity to redouble our efforts at public awareness, and we got the dates of May 2nd and 3rd set aside as State Save the Whales Days by then Governor Thomas Meskel. With his support, we sponsored a statewide Save the Whale student poster contest. These are some of the winners. And we organized a public march and rally in Hartford. We knew that we needed something dramatic to attract public attention. So we secured permission from the National Guard to use the State Armory as the construction site for a life-size, 60-foot-long model of a sperm whale, which we built using wooden slats and chicken wire for a frame, and then covered with a makeshift skin of black plastic. This became the first CONNY, as nicknamed by adding Y to the abbreviation for Connecticut. It really was a fantastic sight. We secured a state police motorcycle escort for the Army flatbed truck carrying the whale to the parade downtown, past Lafayette and the state capitol and the Bushnell Memorial on Capitol Avenue, and then further down all the way on Capitol Avenue to Main Street in Hartford, where, to the amazed delight of both youngsters and oldsters, the whale headed north toward the center of town. We wanted people to know how much the sperm whale had contributed to Connecticut's past and why action was needed now to prevent this giant of the sea from becoming extinct, like the dinosaur whose red statue stands in the courtyard outside City Hall. The Save the Whales March through Hartford, accompanying CONNY, was a family affair, participated in also by famous whale scientists like Dr. Ted Walker on the right, and on the left, with a gray-black beard, Jean-Michel Cousteau, the son of Jacques Cousteau. This May 1974 rally set the stage for a renewed legislative lobbying campaign the following year in 1975, And this time, statewide support for the whale as state animal was overwhelming. It didn't cost the state any money, and when the Senate finally approved the bill, though some people laughed at us, we knew that this simple action would make the whale a powerful symbol for global conservation and a dramatic stimulus for public education. Being the official state animal made the whale a natural subject for study in schools throughout the state. Cetacean Society members thanking then Governor Ella Grasso for her support included myself, Robbins Barstow, just left of the governor, and next to her on the right, Tom Callanan and Don Cinetti. It was a great day for school kids and for the future of whales when Mrs. Grasso, in May 1995, congratulated us in her Capitol office when she signed the bill into law. Then came the hard part. How many people in Connecticut knew what our new state animal was really like? We formed a volunteer partnership with what was then called the Children's Museum on Trout Brook Drive in West Hartford. This is where we had deposited the first Conny whale model after the 1994 parade. Its remains of wooden slats and chicken wire lay on the ground outside the planetarium, and together we decided to build right there a new Conny, this time a permanent life-size model made of ferro cement. After dismantling the remains and bidding a fond farewell to the old Conny, we assembled a Mission Impossible team of volunteers. We recruited a young engineer named Robert Victor to prepare engineering plans and specifications, and staked out the spot where we planned to begin. Miraculously also, we found a part-time actor and creative Renaissance genius named David Curran, who agreed to design and direct the overall project. The first thing David did was to weld together a small copper wire model of a sperm whale based upon all we could learn at that time about sperm whale physiology. He fitted it with measured cross-sections from head to tail. We found out that Harvard University in Cambridge, Massachusetts had a mounted skeleton of a young sperm whale in their museum, so we visited it and took photos of its teeth and lower jaw, the skull cavity, giant ribs, and vertebrae. We also consulted with whale scientists and other artists like Larry Foster from California, because we wanted our life-size replica to be just as scientifically accurate as possible. Back in 1975, no one had yet taken underwater photographs of living sperm whales. But Dave Curran used his artistic genius to mold and cover with a gray plastic coating his 1/20th scale model of a male sperm whale. David previously built himself a ferro-cement boat, and on the basis of this experience, he used this 3-foot model to calculate the blown-up dimensions and specifications for our projected ferro-cement whale. It certainly would be big, with the head beginning here at the left, and the body extending back to the mouth, and then the flippers, and then on, and on, and on to where the elevated triangular tail would be, 60 feet in length, 18 meters. The actual size the adult male sperm whales grow to in the ocean. Donald Cinetti, our Cetacean Society president, wanted to be sure that people knew what it was that we were working on from the very beginning. There were a number of different phases to the construction. But to begin with, we had to use a lot of lumber, much of it donated. Most of us were strictly amateur carpenters, but working weekends and holidays throughout the fall, our work crews of volunteer enthusiasts soon learned how to hammer and saw with vigor. The first thing we had to do was to construct 2 large cement piers or pedestals for the finished whale to rest upon. Then we had to put together and lay down a heavy wooden framework to support on the ground the mammoth superstructure to be subsequently raised. With Bob Victor's dog as a mascot, we had all ages of volunteers eager to participate in this fabulous undertaking. This formed the foundation for what was to become one of the most unique and dramatic education and conservation displays any place in the world. From this base, we had to put up a whole series of wooden cross-sections like ribs, each one of them different in size and height. This is the largest one, rising to 18 feet at the peak in the center. Each cross-section was laid out and hammered together on the ground and then raised upright in a sequential row. These first 5 frames outlined the exterior dimensions of the whale's massive head. Horizontal wooden slats were used to keep the cross-section frames in place and to stabilize the superstructure. Eventually, we ended up with a total of 20 of these oval-shaped cross-section pieces, held together by wooden slats extending over the entire length of the body. It was a long way from the smallest elevated tailpiece to the 18-foot-high brow at the head. But now the overall outline of the whale's body was beginning to take shape. It was interesting to view it at this stage from a variety of perspectives. The next phase of construction required the use of extensive scaffolding all around the whale. A 3-tier set of scaffolds was generously loaned to the museum by Patent Construction Systems in Hartford, and the John P. Narden Company of West Hartford loaned the wooden scaffold planks needed for workers to stand on. When the weather was good, morale was high among these phenomenal volunteer crew members, here enjoying a bite of lunch together on a beautiful fall Saturday in October 1975. What we had to do next was to cover the entire body of the whale with a couple of layers of chicken wire. This was like attaching a transparent skin over all the exterior of the whale from top to bottom and from head to tail. Most of the chicken wire was donated by Porch and Patio of Wethersfield, and it was flexible enough so that it could be bent to the proper shapes to encase the 60-foot form of our emerging Leviathan. Key workers like Steve Richardson and Gary Carter unwrapped the chicken wire in rolls, draping it over the wooden frames from the back down to the belly, as we carefully fastened it piece by piece to the framework supports. The family of Hazel and David Ransom provided mainstream assistance and helped get us ready for the next big operation. This was to unroll long strips of 1/4-inch steel rod, which we then had to attach horizontally along the entire length of the whale, using thousands of small tie wires to fasten the steel rods to the chicken wire. The steel had to be cut into 60-foot lengths and then handed up the scaffolding to be tied on. By this time we were beginning to attract media attention, and news cameramen stopped by occasionally looking for interesting angles, both inside and out of the whale. After the horizontal rods were attached, each just a couple of inches apart, another set of rods had to be fastened on vertically from top to bottom, so that in the end the entire surface of the whale was covered by a small squared latticed grid of steel rod on top of the double-layered chicken wire. Another important part of the whale modeling was the making of the giant white teeth to be embedded in the long lower jaw. For 6 successive weeks we had Tuesday tooth nights, when volunteers like Kay McCarthy and Hazel Ransom molded 46 individual cement teeth the size of large cucumbers, which then had to be laboriously affixed to the narrow jaw frame extending out beneath Connie's massive head. Fastening the long steel rods to the chicken wire was a painstaking and time-consuming job, requiring many hands and hundreds of volunteer hours. Among the workers engaging in this task were Meg Barstow, Tom Charles Stevenson, Ray Hurlburt, and Paula Wysocki. It was estimated that a total of more than 4 miles of steel rod had to be used in all, provided through the generosity of Shep Schwartz of the Shepherd Steel Company in Hartford. The thousands of little tie wires used to secure the rods were donated by A.H. Harris and Sons in New Britain. One afternoon, Don Sonetti even succeeded in wiring Charles Stevenson inside the whale, only temporarily, of course. It was a heady moment indeed when we finally had all the preliminary bodywork completed, and we could walk along the rugged back to stand and cheer on the whale's great head. We took the scaffolding down in December, before winter set in, and except for the absence of its mighty tail, Connie really had the look of a monumental whale. Part 1 of our impossible mission had now been accomplished. This is the way the whale remained during the winter months, with snow on the ground and sometimes on Connie too. In the spring of 1976, when the floodwaters came to the Connecticut River, we drove down to Portland to pick up our itinerant master builder, David Curran, where he had been living aboard the ferro-cement boat he had built for himself some years before. The boat was floating in the water, moored at the Portland boat dock. We now needed Dave to supervise the remaining stages of Connie's construction. And after shaking the springtime mud from his feet, David returned with us to West Hartford to resume the task for which his unconventional wisdom and experience were so essential. There was the great form of Connie, waiting for completion, a tremendous hollow shell of chicken wire and steel rods on tall standing wooden frames, with the rear of the body narrowing up to a tailless stump. Our Cetacean Society volunteers had taken advantage of the winter months to construct inside an adjacent building a giant 15-foot triangular tail for Connie. It too was structured of chicken wire and steel rods fastened together with tie wires. To keep it from becoming too heavy, we had filled the inside with tightly packed newspapers stuffed between the two surfaces. Then came the mammoth job of raising this great flat tail nearly 20 feet up into the air, to be firmly attached to the narrow peduncle at the end of the whale's body. It took an entire Saturday afternoon for a large crew to get this tail all the way up and to secure it in place. When we finally succeeded, it was great cause for celebration. What remained to be done before the cement surface could be applied to Connie was to cover the entire body with yet another layer of chicken wire on top of all the steel rods. These long rods extending down the back of the whale, when combined with the chicken wire coverings, provided the steel reinforcement that would make the model strong and stable. Since Connie was to be an educational exhibit, a means had to be made for people to get inside the hollow shape. So engineer Robert Victor used some large metal shears to literally cut out 2 6-foot-high doorway openings on the side of the whale nearest the museum. When the whale was finished, these open doorways would provide entrance and exit, enabling people of all ages to have the unique experience of seeing the cavernous size of the whale from inside. Helping to remove the cutaway door frame and add his congratulations was Ben Baxter. According to Bob Victor's engineering specifications, as approved by the town building department, the interior of Connie, when completed, would have the capacity to hold 29 persons at one time. After opening up the whale, the whole work crew used to eat lunch inside Connie, and when designer David Curran had a birthday, we gave him the honor of being the first person since Pinocchio to party inside a whale. How do you like that cake, David? Even while work was in progress, Connie provided a fascinating educational experience for school children. A group of young Hartford students visiting the Science Museum with their teacher Daniel Barstow had the chance to be the first ones able to examine the incredible structure from both inside and out. It certainly was an awesome sight for all of them. Dave Curran and I joined the students to explain that this was the actual size that sperm whales grow to in the oceans of the world, and to explain why it had been named Connecticut's official state animal. There were two important parts of the whale that still needed to be added. Sperm whales have paddle-like flippers on the sides of their bodies, so we had to construct separately, as we had done with the tail, and then attach two flippers, one on each side. We secured photos of the flippers of a dead sperm whale taken at a former Canadian whaling station, and Dave used these photos as a guide to make the flippers for Connie as realistic as possible. Also added at this time were extra little humps of chicken wire to give the rear body its requisite corrugated appearance. We also had to make special arrangements for the creation of the whale's eyes. Sperm whale eyes are the size of oranges, and we found a glass blower in Branford, Connecticut, who was willing to shape some molten glass into the proper form. He put some dark coloring in the center and actually made two sets of eyes, so we would have a spare pair if needed. It was quite a challenge to fasten these glass eyes to the chicken wire and steel in the middle of each side of the whale's head, but they were essential for Connie's authentic look. Then finally, at long, long last, after 9 months of labor, we were ready for the big day. This was to be the grand climax of all our efforts. Saturday, the 29th of May, 1976, was the day set for covering this monumental frame with an inch-thick layer of cement over its entire form. Since sperm whales live in all of the world's 7 seas, we decided to call this day of cetacean glory 7 Seas Day, the Connecticut Cachalot Connie Concrete Construction Completion Climax Day. Our whale model project had turned out to be what Hartford radio announcer Bob Steele called the biggest amateur construction job since Noah built the ark. The grounds outside the Science Museum in West Hartford were piled high with bags of cement and with the donated heavy equipment needed to mix it all. More than 100 volunteers of all ages had assembled on the scene to participate in this unforgettable event. Cheryl Daniels helped to staff the registration table, giving out identifying 7 Seas Day work crew badges. Before getting started, precautions were taken to help protect workers' fingers from the hands-on job of applying the abrasive wet cement to Connie. Chief Nurse Ann Reardon helped cover fingertips for volunteers like young Mike Parent with a protective ointment. West Hartford clothier Alan Collins had donated 288 pairs of white cotton work gloves to be worn over the ointment when handling cement. We found that most gloves wore through in less than an hour of use with wet cement. It was estimated that during the course of this one day, 15 tons of fresh cement were used to blanket the outside and inside of Connie and thus create its permanent shell of ferro-cemented reinforced concrete. A special coloring agent was added to the cement to make it dark gray. Volunteers that day came from all over Connecticut and from Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New York, New Jersey, and even from as far away as Ohio. It took a little while to get specific jobs assigned and work crews organized, but top boss David Curran was glad to have an ambulance crew on duty throughout the day, even though it was never actually needed. When everything was geared up and ready to roll, Dave Curran gave everyone their final instructions for what had to be a stupendous exercise in cooperative endeavor. Once the process got underway, it continued steadily throughout the day, with periodic changes in work crews to relieve the strain. The cement was mixed and poured out and shoveled into buckets, which were then passed along and handed up to the cementers on the scaffolding. Their job was then, with trowels, white gloves, and sponges, to scoop out the cement and plaster it onto the chicken wire and steel rod surface. They started with Connie's massive head, and the aim was to mount an inch-thick layer of cement over everything for the entire length of the body. Among those working on the scaffold was Ed Wadstrom, one of the Society's most long-time and faithful members. From the top of the scaffolding, we spread out a large plastic awning to protect the back of the whale from too much direct sunlight, which might make the cement dry too fast. Once the cement was slapped on, it had to be smoothed and evened out. A few skilled cement experts taught the scores of amateurs what to do, and most of the time it stuck pretty well. One of the most difficult parts of the job was applying cement to the inside surface of the whale. The inside cementing had to be coordinated with the outside cementing, and except at the bottom, it was harder to make the cement stick. Also, it was very hot and confining in the interior of the whale. The ferro cement shell of Connie needed to end up like a melded sandwich, with inch-thick outer layers of cement covering both sides of the reinforcing middle section of chicken wire and steel rod. It took some practice to make the small ridges of the corrugated surface on the rear part of the whale's body turn out realistically, but we did manage. One of the most interesting areas to work on was the mouth and lower jaw with its giant white teeth. A lot of cement had to cover that jaw and its connection to the mouth, so it would be strong enough to stand out by itself several feet above the ground. Sperm whales only have teeth in their lower jaw, but the upper jaw had to have a groove for the lower jaw to fit into if the mouth were closed. Special care had to be taken in cementing around the eyes and in covering the flippers. By the end of the afternoon, most of the whale's 60-foot body was covered with cement. The tail, however, required a lot of special effort. High above the ground, buckets of cement were hauled up by rope and passed along the scaffolding to the tail workers. Dave Curran was particularly concerned about having the tail and its attachment to the whale's body strong enough so that it could withstand winds and weight. This is how the top of the whale's back appeared now, looking toward the head. This is the view from the top, looking at the tail, much of it not yet filled with cement. At the tip of the head, great pains have been taken to shape the whale's single blowhole located on the left side of the brow. Only the sperm whale has this kind of an asymmetrical single blowhole. Its spout shoots out forward and to the left. A slight breeze blew up at the end of the day, but we still had to keep going. Wet sponges were used to smooth the surface of the whale's gray-colored skin. Meg Barstow was in charge of the Connecticut Cetacean Society information table, and as weary work crews continued their labors into the evening hours, Don Sinetti kept our morale up with an occasional song. To get the job of cementing fully completed, some people had to stay working by lamplight, putting on finishing touches until well past midnight. Then came a 3-day wait. As soon as the cementing was done, we encased the entire whale in a gigantic plastic bag, like a cocoon, and for 3 days and nights we used 2 steam generators to pump hot steam inside the plastic bag to bake and harden the cement as quickly and thoroughly as possible. This was really quite a phenomenon. Whatever way you looked at it, it made quite a picture. You could see the outlines of the whale inside the plastic, and we became impatient to have it unveiled. But we had to keep the curing going for 3 full days to make sure it would last. Actually, we had to keep a 24-hour watch to make sure nothing happened to the plastic and that the hot steam was generating all the time. We took turns standing by the side of the whale or sitting at our ease. Inside the plastic covering, it was hot, steamy, and moist. To be in there next to this giant whale was almost like being underwater with him. It was a mystical experience. Dave Curran, with his expert knowledge of ferrocement, was particularly proud of having this done. He knew it would make Connie last for a long time. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, we had scheduled a public unveiling ceremony, and as we neared the appointed hour, representatives of the media began to appear on the scene. A lot of the volunteer workers and their families also came to the museum that afternoon to share in this exciting event. It was covered by cameramen from all 3 of Connecticut's major television stations, Channel 3, 8, and 30. This represented the culmination of over 5,000 hours of volunteer labor, extending over nearly an entire year from August to June, as well as many contributions of materials and equipment. At 5 p.m. on Wednesday, the 2nd of June, 1976, in a brief informal ceremony, Meg Barstow handed out roses to key participants. Then the drums rolled and Dave Curran at the whale's tail cut loose the plastic sheath, and there Connie was revealed in all his monumental glory, grace, beauty, and power. These celebratory scenes speak for themselves. From the beginning, the ultimate purpose of CONNY had been to help bring an end to all human killing of sperm whales and other cetaceans, whales, dolphins, and porpoises. The model was built to show what an incredibly marvelous and magnificent creature this marine mammal is, with the largest brain weighing 20 pounds of any animal ever to have lived on planet Earth. We believed that people, young and old, seeing CONNY, would join in demanding a total end to whale killing. What a thrill it was for me to clamber up the scaffolding to the very top of this gigantic creation, and though temporarily dislodging my captain's cap, to survey from this majestic dome what all our efforts had wrought. Standing on the now completed head and tail of this tremendous whale model was an unforgettably awe-inspiring and joy-evoking experience. It was a lasting tribute to an all too rare kind of creative teamwork for a significant purpose. We all exulted in our mission accomplished. Dave Curran wanted to test how strong the tail was, and it stood the test. Even with all the wooden support beams removed, the ferro-cement construction was so strong and kept the heavy tail so firmly attached to the whale's body that it easily held the weight of the builder and even additional humans as well. After cutting away the external wooden frame, only the protruding ends of the wooden support posts remained buried in the cement surface of the head. We placed a bouquet of red roses in CONNY's mouth as a symbol of reverence. On the far side of the whale, the two open doorways could be seen through which visitors would have entrance and exit to the inside of the whale. And here are Robert Victor, Robbins Barstow, and David Curran, the trio that had overseen this marvelous construction project. CONNY was no longer a whale under construction. He was a whale constructed. Before the scaffolding could be taken down, there still remained a number of finishing touches which needed to be completed. There were holes in the whale's body where the wooden support posts had been, and these needed to be covered over and patched up with small amounts of cement. This was a painstaking task for additional volunteers, but it provided considerable satisfaction when accomplished. There were also parts of the whale's body where excess cement and uneven applications had to be sanded down and smoothed out, particularly on the flippers. Dave Curran was the expert at this, with a weighted bucket used to counterbalance the heavy sanding machine. The lower jaw required a lot of special attention. So much cement had been piled on the jaw to make sure that it would hold up, that some of the white teeth were nearly buried. It took much time to chip and chisel away the excess cement from around each tooth to give it full form. At the other end of the whale, Dave once again had to test the broad horizontal tail. Even with the scaffolding still surrounding him, the at last completed Connie was a truly awesome sight. Finally, the time came to dismantle all the scaffolding. Piece by piece, from the top down, first the long walking planks, and then the metal frames. This was an operation that called for repeated warnings of, "Look out below." When at last the scaffolding was removed, the whale stood out in all his awesome splendor. We could inspect this life-size model as a monumental display of natural history, an educational exhibit for young and old. Soon it was being visited by scientists and diplomats from literally around the world, and it presented fine photo opportunities for senators and governors like Lowell Weicker here. To make Connie more accessible to his many visitors, a follow-up project was undertaken in the months following his completion. A cement walkway was constructed, again with volunteer labor, leading from the entrance driveway of the museum. Engineer Bob Victor operated the borrowed bobcat, carrying stones and cement to the places where they were needed. A firm foundation had to be laid down first and pounded flat to support the concrete surface. A wheelbarrow also received considerable use because the cement path was to extend from one end of the whale to the other, with elevated ramps leading up to the walk-through entrance and exit doorways on the far side of Connie. Making a smooth sidewalk by hand and board involves a great deal of hard labor, often on all fours. While the walkway and ramps were being constructed, a related project was underway at a backyard studio in Glastonbury, Connecticut. Noted sculptor Casimir Michalczyk had been commissioned to carve on a large flat piece of slate a special plaque with a sculptured whale image identifying Connie as a sperm whale designated Connecticut state animal in 1975. The plaque also listed some basic facts about sperm whales. In October 1978, a dedication ceremony was held to unveil the plaque. Dignitaries present included Frank Gardner, second from the right here, the museum's administrative director at that time, and on the left, David Bonney, the museum's head. Following brief remarks concerning the history of sperm whales in Connecticut and the dangers that they then faced as an endangered species still being killed around the world, we arranged for Connie to spout off a couple of times, after which the explanatory plaque was put on display at the side of the walkway. Visitors were then invited to walk through the whale, the only life-size ferrocement model of an adult male sperm whale any place in the world. Since then, Connie has been visited every year by thousands of Connecticut school children. He provides them with a unique and awe-inspiring educational experience. Indeed, Connie has become an attraction without parallel for all ages. In 1976, at the time that Connie was built, the nations of the world were killing 40,000 great whales a year, including nearly 20,000 sperm whales. In addition to being an educational exhibit, Connie served as a springboard for conservation action on a global scale, seeking an end to the needless slaughter of these wondrous animals. In 1977, we took our cause to the United Nations in New York City. At that time, the UN was drafting a far-reaching treaty to establish an international law of the sea. We held a Save the Whales rally at Isaiah's Wall across from the UN and presented to United States Ambassador Elliot Richardson petitions with 20,000 signatures asking that the Law of the Sea Treaty include a provision for the protection of whales. The following year, our Cetacean Society representatives again met with United Nations officials in New York, and when the Law of the Sea Treaty was finally adopted in 1982, as shown to me by the UN Undersecretary General Bernardo Giulietta, it did include a specific clause in Article 65 dealing with marine mammals, calling upon the nations of the world, in the case of cetaceans in particular, to cooperate for their conservation, management, and study through the appropriate international organizations. The appropriate organization for whales was the International Whaling Commission, which held annual meetings in England. So we gathered more petitions and, along with many other groups, sent representatives to the IWC meetings and to anti-whaling rallies like this one in Trafalgar Square, London. It took many years of effort before we were able to stop most whaling. I was a member of the United States delegation to the 1979 meeting of the International Whaling Commission in London, where the first major breakthrough occurred. The IWC banned factory ship sperm whaling and established an Indian Ocean sanctuary. 2 years later, in 1981, an historic victory was won, and the IWC voted to end all sperm whaling. This at last made it possible to begin a benign research program to study sperm whales peacefully without harming them. A new breed of whale scientists emerged, using small sailing ships like this in the Indian Ocean to observe and follow whales alive. Pioneer researchers like Hal Whitehead spent months in the waters off Sri Lanka photographing sperm whales for the first time without harpoons, watching them leap out of the water in a dramatic breach or float calmly on the surface like giant logs. And for the first time, they took underwater photographs of living sperm whales, like this mother and calf. Though smaller than an adult male, their wonder was still without compare. Now human beings could actually see on film the consummate grace and power of the living sperm whales in their natural habitat, for whom our concrete model in West Hartford had become a global symbol of protection. So this has been the story of the building of Connie. In 1996, 20 years after his original construction, with new threats looming for the resumption of commercial whale killing, Connie remains dedicated to his continuing mission of raising people's consciousness about the wonder of whales and the need for their being permanently protected worldwide.
This windy old weather, stormy old weather, when the wind blows, we'll all go together. Oh, up jumped the humpback, singing his song, jumping and laughing and splashing along in this windy old weather, stormy old weather, when the wind blows, we'll all go together. And then come a sperm whale, and guess what he did? He come to the top with a 50-foot squid in this windy old weather, stormy old weather. When the wind blows, we'll all go together.
More of Robin Sparstow's whale documentaries are available on the BTA Films channel on YouTube. Click here to subscribe or follow these links to other films by a master of home movie storytelling in the pre-digital era.